I want to show you how to use the SketchUp Pro Layout application to create professional shop drawings. Unfortunately, native SketchUp Make, and the SketchUp application itself doesn't have very sophisticated dimensioning, printing, or layout capabilities. So you certainly cannot create anything like what you're looking at here. A shop drawing with a title block, properly printed to scale, and so on. You can do some very crude printing in SketchUp and some crude dimensioning, but if you need professional level shop drawings for your customers or your shop for people to build off of, you're going to need to use the Layout application in SketchUp. So it's called Layout. You can see up here, and it comes with SketchUp Pro. So the way I'm going to start is I want to give you a tour of how all this works, kind of the high-level overview, and then we'll drop down and talk a bit more about the details, and then show you how to create a brand new file and link it. So the way this works is it's actually linked to a SketchUp file. So let me show you the model that this is linked to. If I go back to SketchUp, this is the kitchen that we're doing the drawing of. And the way it works is you create a bunch of scenes that you want. And we'll go over that later, and we've got some other videos that go over that. But for example, here's a elevation of fridge wall, and it's looking at it directly on, so it's not a perspective drawing. We've got a section of the refrigerator wall. You can see we're looking inside the cabinets here. So we've created all these, the things that we want in our shop drawings, the scenes that we want. These are just standard scenes in SketchUp land, and you create them, as many as you want, and those will essentially get linked or imported into the layout file that you can then dimension and so on. You could dimension them right here in SketchUp. It has a little dimensioning tool. Oops, sorry, it's not the dimensioning tool. The dimensioning tool is right here, and I could just grab a couple points and dimension, but it doesn't do a good job of professional notation, and as it gets moved around, it kind of sits there with the, it gets linked to the model itself. But there's not a lot of sophistication to it, and certainly the printing is very difficult to do, and you can't really do it to scale, and so on. So we're going to do all of our dimensioning and hatching and everything in the layout program. You can also hatch in SketchUp, and it looks okay, but unfortunately when that's exported to layout, they don't, most of the standard hatches don't work so well. That's something we're working on. We hope in the future to be able to automatically hatch when you create a section based on the material type and have that imported into the layout, so you don't have to do that work manually. But for now you do. All right, so you can see all the different elevations and sections that we have here. And let's go back over to the layout application. So we'll cover this in more detail later, but if you go to File, Document Setup, one of the things that happens here is this file is linked to the skip file, or SketchUp file is linked to this layout instance of layout. And it's telling me that the status is current. And what that means is, let's go back to our SketchUp application. Let's just say I change anything. It doesn't really matter. I could just draw a rectangle, but and I save this file. What it's going to happen is, from layout's point of view, this file will have changed. And we could have changed a cabinet, we could have changed a material, a hatch, we could have added a countertop, we could have deleted something. And if we go back over to layout, and we go in and look at the document setup again, look, it's saying, it's highlighting it and saying the status is old. That means that it's detected that you've done something to that file and it's out of date. And if you click on it and say update, what it's doing is it's relinking to the file, and any changes that were made would come in. Now, we didn't make any change that would really affect things. I'll show you what happens if we do later on. But now we're current. So if there were any changes, they would be reflected in this file. And we could relink to a completely different file. That's a little dangerous when you've got all this stuff already dimensioned and hatched and everything. So that's not something you want to. That's if you're starting maybe with a new design and you wanted to reuse this file format. You would relink, but most of the time you're just going to update. So if we look at this, here we're just like in SketchUp. We've got a bunch of little windows with different functions that I can click on the bar and it'll close and open it. And one thing I should say before I go too far here is one reference you might want to get is this was a pretty good reference book on the layout program. It's called SketchUp to Layout, and it's by Matt Donnelly. So if you want a layout reference that's pretty comprehensive, this might be worth investing in, and you get it in electronic format. That's not very expensive. I think he may have it updated all the way to 2015, but I don't think he's updated for 2017 yet, or 16. But there's not that many changes. So back to our file here, and up here, this box shows the different pages. So here is my plan view for the lowers. I've got a plan view for the uppers. I've got an elevation for the sink wall that is partially missing. Let's see if that's so there's something I got to investigate on that view. But you can see on these other views that everything is where it should be. So I've got a section for the fridge wall that we looked at earlier on the other program. Notice now that it's hatched and dimensioned and all that good stuff. So another block here is the layers block. Just like in SketchUp, you've got the opportunity to put things on layers. So for example, the title block's on one layer. By clicking on it, you get a little pencil saying that's the active layer. Models themselves, that this little eyeball here turns the layer off. So if I turn it off, you can see all the lines that came in from SketchUp have disappeared, and all that's left me is the hatch and the dimensions and the title block. If I turn off the title block, oops, you'll notice everything related to the title block goes away. And if I turn this back on and turn off the dimensions, I've got the hatches and the dimensions on the same layer. I could have hatch on a separate layer if I wanted to. So whatever's clicked here is the active layer. That means that anything you draw right now will, for example, end up on the title block layer. Mostly I'm going to be drawing dimensions and hatches, so I like to leave it on the dimensions layer. The models automatically come in on the models layer. So title block, obviously a good thing to have. This is something you can draw. Layout comes with your basic tools like a rectangle tool. I can draw a rectangle. And any shape that I draw, I've got this box here called shape style. I can have a pattern in it. Right now there's a pattern. I'll turn that off. Hold on. Sorry, I got to select. Just like in SketchUp, if I hit the space bar or escape, it'll get me out of a tool. So here I've selected that. And if we look here, I'm going to say I don't want to fill. And Sorry, I don't want a pattern in there. So now I've just got my exterior, and the stroke is a 0.4 stroke. I could make it a 1 point, so it's a little bit thicker than it was. I can have dashed lines around the outside. So I can change things. And that's how I would draw my title block. So all these are just lines, a little radius in the corner. So I got circle tools, I've got a polygon tool, rectangle, arcs, and lines. And that's how you draw everything in. There's also a text right here. There's labels that I'll show you later that you can use when you're dimensioning, eraser tools, and so on. So they even, with 2017, allow you to put in a table. If you have to, say, list out hardware or something like that, you can do that as well. So once you've drawn your title block, hopefully on the title block layer, you can save a file as a template, which I will show you a little later on. And that way, every new file that you create will be created with your template and your title block. This is my version of it, and that's what comes up every time I open a new file. So we'll circle back to that later. Right now, I just kind of want to show you the general concepts. And the most fundamental concept here is, did you see what happens when I click up sort of in this empty space here? I happen to know that I've got what's called a viewport. So, and I can resize the viewport, and I can duplicate the viewport if I want. But what this is doing is when I highlight this, and if I go to SketchUp Model, what this is telling me is what view I would like to, or scene that I would like to grab from SketchUp to look at in this viewport on this page. And right now I'm looking at the section of fridge wall, but it's been modified. So I don't want to switch back to the original one right now. I'll show you that later, because I may have resized this or something like that, and it would go back the way it originally was. But let me show you the cover page. So what's cool is you can mix and match 3D views along with your 2D views if you want in your shop drawings. So I could put multiple viewports on a page. And it's thinking here. Hopefully it will flip over and show me that page here in a second. There we go. So I've actually got four. If I click on this, I've got 4 viewports on here. And they're showing different scenes. So you can look at this one, and it's showing modified perspective of the sink wall. And this one's modified perspective of fridge wall, but a different view, and so on. So let me show you how we could create one of these. And I'm going to delete this one. All I did was highlight it and hit delete. And now if I highlight this one and right click, sorry, not right click, go up to edit, duplicate. So I can duplicate, and if I move my mouse over it, I'll get the move symbol, and I can move that down. And I can grab the corner and I can resize it however I want to fit in there. Now right now it's showing the same thing as this view up here. So this is really powerful. What you're doing is you're putting a little window to a scene back in SketchUp. And you can choose what the scene is by clicking on it and going over to SketchUp Model here. And now I'm going to choose one of my different perspectives, and I forget which one I had here, maybe the island. think that was it. So it's this little symbol here is showing that it's re-rendering with the new view. Yeah, so that's what I had in there before. And now what you can do is if I double click on it, see I've got the orbit symbol. If I click on my mouse here, I can orbit around if I don't like the exact way that scene was in there. And if I hit the shift key, it turns into a hand. And now I can move it around to position it a little better because maybe I want to zoom in on the island just a little bit more. Now I can use my zoom tool and use the hand and move it, center it, and there we go. So now what I need to do is go click over outside of it to get me out of that window. So notice it's not highlighted anymore. So what I did was I highlighted it, double clicked on it, and that allows me to go into that window and modify, play around with that scene. And that's why now if we click out of here, you'll notice if I click on this, you'll notice it says modified perspective island. And that's what that's telling me is I used the perspective island scene from my original SketchUp file, but I've modified it. What I did was I rotated it, I zoomed, I did all that. So it's telling me that I've made some changes, so I got to be careful if I go back to the original. So that's the exact same thing that I'm seeing here, except it's just one big one. Now I could have made a smaller one over here and duplicated this viewport, made it a little smaller, and I could have put a 3D view up in here. I could put something else down below. What if I want to, and let's talk a little bit about scale. So notice also when I chose this, I also chose a scale that I wanted to do that. I've got 1 to 9. And one thing you definitely, well, I shouldn't say definitely, but you usually want is to click this button to preserve the scale on resize. So if I resize this window, what it's going to do is I'm only going to see a little bit less of it. But if I wouldn't have had this clicked, and I resize it, it's going to start changing my scale, which I do not want. So now I'm going to do undo a couple times here so I get back to where I was. Undo resize. Undo resize. I want to get back to my original. And what do I do now? Undo resize again. A few times apparently. And undo resize is my last. This should get me back to where I was. Now notice, so I've got preserve scale on resize. And when I resize down here, notice that I don't see my model in the back anymore because I've made my window smaller, but I am seeing my dimensions, my text, and my hatches. And that is because, and if I turn my dimensions layer off for a second, you'll see that we're just getting the window on to the model, but oops. Dimensions, you can put them in anywhere on the screen. It doesn't have to be within this window. So they are being written here outside the window, but there's nothing to reference to now because I made my window smaller. So if I bring it back, oops, I'll get my model back and there'll be something for it to reference. All right, so that's the real fundamental concept here is we're creating these viewports, as many as you want on a page, and you're looking at whatever scene you want, and once that's in there, then you can start doing your dimensioning and hatching and so on. So let's see. We go back and look at some of these other windows here. We'll cover the pattern fill later when we talk about hatching. This is dimensions when we talk about dimensioning. But there is this scrapbook here, and that's where they give you a bunch of different drafting symbols in different styles. So I chose drafting symbols 3, and that's where I've got all my elevation and section markers and things like that, and my page views here. Now the other thing that's cool, and so you can explore the different ones here and find ones that you like and work well for you. But another cool feature here is if we go to document setup again, file document setup, there is something called auto text. And you've got page name, page number, and page name is the name of the page that you give up here. So plan view lowers, right? Page number, it's just asking you for the style. It starts at number 1, and the starting page is cover page. Project number, I can put in anything I want. I've got 17A2. Project title is Truskanoff Kitchen, and the release date. And notice it's got this little bracket and it says file name there, right? So if I go down here and I look at my title block, this isn't really Truskanoff Kitchen. If I double click on it, it's project title, these little brackets on it. Likewise, this text right here is page name. This is date, which is release date, project number, and this one, if I can get it to click on, zoom in there, is, it's hard to see, it's such a small text box, but it's page number. What's cool about that is now, if I put that in there in my title block, watch what happens when I go to the ladder basis page. Still Truskanoff Kitchen, because that's a global thing. But sheet name is now ladder basis. It's the exact same name as my page number, my page name. The date gets put in there, the project number gets put in there, and the sheet number gets put in there. So now it's sheet number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 ladder bases. So if you set it up this way, all you got to do is make sure you name your page what you want. And I also have it right here, I believe. Yep, that's also page name. And the scale I have to put in manually. But this is also page number. So you can do, auto text works really well to help you organize your drawing. So from an organization point of view, you're going to want to do something like that. And also make sure that you set up your layers so that you're putting stuff on different layers. That'll help you when you need to turn things on and off, get to things and so on. So again, some of the things that we can do, we can add text, we can add hatches, we can add our symbols. This was a symbol here. The symbol is on our first page here. We can add markers or labels. That's saying cabinet C5, box 1. That's off the SketchUp drawing. I can have boxes with text in them that correspond to my material legend. Got my hatch legend over here. So it's a standard set of shop drawings. You can organize them the way you want. Pull out the symbols that you need. And basically, then you've got all the tools you need to create shop drawings in the style that you like. So in the next part of the video, part 2, I'm going to start with a fresh file and show you how to pull these in and actually do the dimensioning and so on. So we'll resume in part 2.